This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award-winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.
Sanbonani nonke. I come to deliver this engagement with you from the beautiful capital city of KwaZulu-Natal. It is the city that I will always choose to live in, regardless of how poorly it's being managed at the moment, because it is an amazing place. And I have to start this by saying that. Alec asked me to talk about what chambers are doing in South Africa, and I think that is a really important thing to look at. I think most of you are aware of the stuff that we do in terms of getting businesses together, training programs, networking, etc. But I want to talk to you today about some action, some advocacy work that we're doing and some development work that we're doing that is really, really important, and I want to tell you why. So on the advocacy side, let me start with a typical day in my shoes. So our municipality's infrastructure is in absolutely abominable state, especially the electricity and more recently the water. So I am a de facto call center for the municipality, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So I constantly take calls and then I try to engage with whoever's on duty to try and find solutions to the issues. So if there are no parts, and in the past when there were no parts, it just wouldn't be fixed. So now when I found out that a water leak can't be fixed because there's no couplings in stock and the couplings are worth 6,000 Rand and my entire industrial area is standing still for a day, it doesn't make sense not to pay the 6,000 bucks. So that's what we do. If we need to send some machinery to site or put security in play because it's too dangerous for people to work in the space at night time and they don't have any security, that's what we do. At the moment, that's everyday life. To add complications to that is it's an election year, so now we have the delightful, they call themselves LACO, the Labour and Civics Organization, that is the MK's Labour Desk, that is going around every day for the last sort of 6 weeks, shutting down various sites, demanding that the Labour come out, saying they represent them, accusing business of the most appalling transgressions as far as Labour is concerned, and all the time videoing it so they can put that on social media and look like the champions of ordinary folk. So there's a lot of intervention as far as that's concerned. And to say that chambers are at the coalface, that's what it means, being at the coalface. It means that every situation that arises, every challenge that business has, you need to be there to try and find a solution or to try and broker one. And so chambers are playing a very critical role. I know to people that live in the Western Cape, this sounds like some kind of anomaly, but I can assure you that a lot of South Africa is operating just like this. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is ASAC. So some years ago, for reasons we won't discuss, the large chambers in South Africa decided that we would form our own association. We withdrew our support of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we formed our own association called the Association of South African Chambers. And that is the Cape Chamber, Johannesburg, Durban, ourselves, Nelson Mandela Bay, Border Counties, London, Northern Cape. There's a long list of chambers, but it's the large chambers in South Africa. And we decided that what we were going to do is we would not have a board. We would take the working CEOs of all of those chambers and we would form our own management committee. And the reason why we did that is so that we could keep our advocacy voice absolutely pure. None of us have business interests ourselves. We are purely there to represent the interests of business generally, and it has given us the freedom to stand up and say some of the stuff that needs to be said. I never told you, but my first meeting with the new CEO of Transnet and her senior management, she said that I was vile in my interview with you about Transnet. And I had to say to her, look, I mean, we're always fair. We try to reason. We continue to put pressure on, and if people are not going to listen, then we have no alternative. I don't apologize for being vile, if that's what I was perceived to be. Things had to change at Transnet, and they did. So I must thank you for the work that you do in bringing a lot of that stuff to light. So thank you, Alec. We also won't, in any engagement, we've been asked on several occasions to engage and to sign non-disclosures. We won't do it, because if there's something that can be said to us, we must be free to be able to speak out about it. So I just want to encourage you to support your local chambers. They're sitting at the forefront of really quite a difficult situation, and they are really working hard for organized business in this country. And there's a lot more capacity to do more. In my own chamber, the Nelson Mandela Bay Chamber and our chamber a few years ago, out of sheer frustration, because we couldn't get municipalities to remove the inefficiencies from our tariffs. Electricity tariffs have escalated at a ridiculous amount over the years, and we couldn't get them to deal with up goes the electricity tariff, but nobody repairs the infrastructure, and nobody addresses things like theft, because it was quite easy to include that in the tariff and put it on our bill. And we tried really hard to get municipalities to operate, to do something about the losses. We then went to the regulator. We said to the regulator, this is unacceptable. The legislation says that municipalities are entitled to get back their efficiently incurred expenditure and a small return on assets. And you're just giving them a percentage every single year, which is exacerbating a bad tariff. And there's no obligation for municipalities to go back and look at their costs and to rectify that situation. And the regulator said they know, but they're not going to change. So they pretty much invited us to go to court. We did go to court. We won that court case. And then they were instructed that municipalities have to submit a cost of supply study every single year to justify their tariffs. Then, of course, the first year that they're supposed to submit a cost of supply, our municipality evidently did submit one. We engaged with them as part of the engagement with them. We said, please, can you share the cost of supply study with us? They said, absolutely not. It's top secret. We want 17%, but you can't see how we calculated it. So we said, well, that's not engaging with us at all. You've got to consult with us, and that's not acceptable. So then we went to the regulator, because the regulator must then make a decision, and they must consult with the public. So we said, can we please have Mzanduzi Municipality's cost of supply study? They said, no, it's top secret. Sorry, you can't have it. And so they just made a decision. So back in court we were, challenging the lawfulness of the decision, and I'm very pleased to say that we won that court case. And they were instructed to go back to the drawing board and to start the process over again. We're in the middle of that process now. They have submitted, as far as I understand, exactly the same cost of supply back again, which is, in our opinion, fatally flawed, but we'll wait for the court to make that decision. Why is this important? Because every single municipality, based on the court case that we won, should be challenging their electricity tariffs, at least looking at the cost of supply and seeing whether or not they are actually charging you a reasonable amount. The other challenge that we have is that there are licensing requirements municipalities have to comply with, but the energy regulator never calls anybody to order when they don't meet those licensing requirements. One of those is to pay Eskom, which our municipality is in serious arrear debt with. The second one is to have a ring-fenced electricity accounts that are individually audited so that you can draw information from that. Very few municipalities do that at all. And our municipality, I feel so sorry for the guys on the ground. We have a 66% vacancy rate in electricity. You're supposed to be spending a certain amount of your electricity money on staff. And there's no ways, with the infrastructure being in the mess that it is in, that they can possibly be able to deal with that. It's so bad that a lot of the mini subs are hardwired straight through, so there's no protection in the system. And when they're doing fault locating, they do switching. My industry have to take their sensitive machines offline until they've actually found the fault in the area, because they can't run with the dips that go from just trying to find a fault. And if you had breakers working in all of those subs, you'd be able to tell between which two subs there was a fault, but you can't tell because of the fact that they're hardwired through, so you don't know where the fault is. So fault location takes a very long time. So it is a challenge. I know that we're not alone in this situation. There are a lot of cities in South Africa facing the same sort of thing. And it's going to be, I heard all the talk earlier of saying take control of your own areas and try to get involved. Our water and electricity issues, I understand, is a 10 billion rand problem for a city of our size. So you can imagine what the level of that problem is for a lot of the cities around. So this is a big problem we are going to have to deal with. And it's a lot of the work that is taking place in that space that being at the forefront of that is being negotiated by chambers. We've offered to fix some of the infrastructure. We're trying to work on agreements that allow us to claim that back over a certain period of time. I think in our situation, we've gone too far past the private sector can step in and fix a lot of that. And our plea to the regulator is to start letting Eskom take over some of these municipalities, because there's no ways they can trade their way out of those situations. We make gross trading losses on electricity, which means that our purchases exceed the revenue from electricity sales, which means that a huge quantum of electricity is lost. Whether it's poor control or conduit theft is debatable. So we've got huge, big challenges. So that takes up a lot of our time and a lot of our energy, and it's going to for the foreseeable future. The really rewarding part of the work that we do is on the development side. We've run several development programs with support from the EU. Some partnerships from the EU. We've run 2 very successful export accelerator programs with 100 black-owned enterprises. And Davi, I'm going to tell you why that's really important. Of the 100 that took part in our programs over the 4 years, we only lost 1. The rest were 100% committed. And we realized as we've been doing these programs that there's things that we have to make part of our programs that nobody realizes have to be part of them. We had to do critical thinking training. We had to do emotional intelligence training. And we've had to also bring in counselors, because the environment that people are trying to make a go of life in can be a very violent environment. And if you're a woman in business and you understand that you need to take the money that you get out of your business and reinvest it, but your partner doesn't see it the same way, that you see money coming in and they think clobbering you and taking the money is their right to do it. You need to be able to give people the support. There's no ways they can focus on running a business when they're facing that kind of environment. And I've got to tell you, they're amazing. Those businesses are absolutely incredible. We've got some that have gone from sales of a revenue of 14,000 rand a month to 2 million. They have taken the intervention, the mentorship, the training, the hand-holding, and they have just absolutely flown. And I'll tell you why that's important, more than just ensuring that people have access to the economy. If you have to think about, I speak to a lot of young people all the time, and I can feel their frustration. There was a counselor, an IFP counselor in our area that used to bring a group of young people to see me every sort of 3 weeks or so. We'd sit and chat for a while. And they were just desperate to have access to the economy. Imagine sitting on the outside looking in and not knowing, how do I get access to that? How do I make a contribution and be part of it? And you can understand people's frustration when that access isn't there. You know, when you're looking at that voting ballot, people are saying, people don't think about it. They must think about how terrible the ANC is, and they must think about what it means for the economy and the country. If you're not included in the economy, then why would you be thinking about that at all? You're going to be looking at that ballot sheet and saying, what am I going to best get out of this deal? Where will I put my cross that will give me the most value? And if somebody comes along and tells you they're going to up your social grant, that's where you're going to stick that tick. And it's not the ANC saying it either. In our area, we have a serious challenge because truth is also chosen. You know, I had an Uber driver at home the other day, and we were driving along one of the main roads, and there was a poster of President Ramaphosa up, and he said, "Eustace President, what has he done for us? Nothing, absolutely nothing." And I said to him, what really astounds me is that the architect of a lot of our problems, our former president, has suddenly been seen as the savior of our people. How do we get to that when clearly those years were a huge, big problem to the whole of South Africa? And he said, ma'am, I have to disagree with you there. And I said, what do you mean you have to disagree? He said, there's such a thing as a smear campaign. People honestly believe that the alternative to what we've experienced now is the MK party, and that they will deliver something of value to them. Because nobody's standing up and giving South Africa what we were promised in the first place. You know, I look at what we've achieved over the last while, and I don't see anybody standing up and saying, we should have designed a South Africa that was different. Some years ago, I was at a Sister Cities conference in Atlanta, and we were talking about how they had deliberately planned for integration. I don't trust anybody that keeps people separate, that divides people on any basis, because they've got some kind of motive for doing it. And at the Sister Cities conference, they were explaining how they basically divided Atlanta up into different zones. So they'd have an IT zone, and then they would go after investment that suited the IT agenda, that was all prepared for IT. But anybody that worked in a zone was entitled to live there. So they took all buildings within the zone. They had retail at the bottom. They had office for a couple of levels. Then they had living accommodation. And if you were a factory worker, you were entitled to a rent rebate. CEO, you were entitled to nothing, but everybody could live where they worked. And people supported the shops and the industry in their own zone. They didn't have to travel far. You didn't have the poorest of the poor living furthest away from opportunity. People integrated. It's very much more difficult to sell people lies when they are integrated. And South Africa deserves to be an integrated society. Apartheid separated us, but we haven't taken away the structures. Often when I'm put on the spot at government functions, people will say, what do you think about big shopping centers and townships? And my answer to that is we shouldn't have townships anymore. We should have planned them away long ago. The fact that we do is an indictment on all of us. So you've got to break down all the barriers of apartheid to make South Africa a place that everybody feels like they belong in. You know, it's easy when you have a lot to look out your window and like the view that you see and not want it to change. But most of South Africa looks out the window and doesn't like the view that they see. Most of South Africa is excluded. So my plea to you is, first of all, support your local chambers. Those 100 businesses have employed 547 people. So, Davi, they are important. There's 547 people that didn't have access to the economy before. These programs where we actually develop businesses, and those businesses are flying. I mean, they've gone from selling in their local communities to being in Macro Online to being in Plumlink and Checkers and Spar. Some of them are exporting to countries that nobody would have imagined possible. They've been given the skills and they've taken those skills and they've flown and they're building meaningful businesses. We need to do that on steroids all around South Africa. We need to ensure that there's inclusivity from all of those people. The other thing you asked me to do is just talk about what should change in South Africa. You've heard, and I don't have to tell you that corruption is the scourge. It's the cancer that's killing our country. But I want to talk just about something that I was in Rwanda a couple of years ago. I went to hike to the silverback gorillas, and I had a guide named Moses. And I'd just come from the Genocide Museum, and I said, Moses, how in 1994 did your new government go to the people of Rwanda and say to them, we are able to build a united society and a country that works out of the ashes of that genocide? And he said something to me at the time that I thought was a really strange thing to say. He said, zero tolerance of corruption gave people hard hope. And I thought, wow, in the context of of Rwanda. That's a really strange thing to say. But then I realized what he was actually saying. In a corrupt society, you can't compete. So ordinary people in a corrupt society have their hope stolen. There is no way for them to be able to compete fairly if the rules don't apply to everyone the same way. So the corruption is not only a theft of the resources and causing us to struggle and our municipalities to fail, it steals our hope. I think the last thing that I want to say before I go and sit down and face Alec is to encourage you to speak out. We've had a lot of people saying, speak out. We're always having to defend business. We're always seen as capitalists that don't care about anybody but ourselves. And that is being used by political parties a lot now. But I know business does a lot of incredible things. We're just not very vocal about the fact that we do. We all have staff that we're able to influence and whose lives we're able to improve. We all give to charity, but is charity actually growing a sustainable economy where people are included? There are a lot of amazing people in South Africa. In fact, ordinary South Africans are absolutely incredible. If we all stand up and we all just do something, we can have the South Africa that we were promised in 1994. Thank you.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award-winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.